It is 1980. In a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, a company that most Americans have never heard of is running a service that does not yet have a name. Users, a few thousand of them, scattered across the country, connect to it through a telephone line and a device called a modem. The connection is slow. The interface is text only. There are no images, no sound, no video. Just words on a screen, moving at a speed that makes a patient person impatient. But those words can do something that nothing else in the world can do in 1980. They can reach another person, in real time, across any distance, through a keyboard and a glowing screen. A person in Columbus can send a message to a person in Seattle and receive a reply within minutes. They can post a question to a forum and have it answered by a stranger who happens to know the answer. They can download a file, read the news, check the weather, book a flight. Everything that will eventually be called the Internet, every function, every social behavior, every commercial application exists in embryonic form on this service in Columbus, Ohio, in 1980. The company is called CompuServe. Almost no one remembers it today. The history of technology is usually written as a story of invention, of the person or company that first imagined something new and built it into existence. We celebrate the first search engine, the first social network, the first smartphone, because we have decided that priority is the same as credit. But priority and credit are not the same thing at all. CompuServe was first with email, first with chat rooms, first with online forums, first with file sharing, first with online shopping, first with a commercial online service that ordinary people could access from their homes. It was first by years, in some cases by a decade. And today it is a footnote. This is the story of CompuServe. And it is not a story about a company that failed because it was outcompeted. It is a story about a company that failed because it could not imagine that what it had built was worth fighting for. CompuServe was not founded to build the future. It was founded in 1969 by a Columbus, Ohio insurance executive named Jeffrey Wilkins to solve a very specific and very boring problem. The problem was this. Computers in 1969 were enormously expensive. A single mainframe capable of serious data processing cost millions of dollars and occupied an entire room. Most companies that needed computing power could not afford to own their own machine. But they could afford to rent time on someone else's machine, to dial in, run their calculations, and disconnect, paying only for the minutes they actually used. This was called time sharing, and CompuServe was built to provide it. The company installed mainframes in Columbus and sold access to them by the hour, primarily to insurance companies and financial institutions that needed to process data without owning the hardware to do it. It was a utility business, unglamorous, technically demanding, and profitable in the quiet way that infrastructure businesses are profitable. But something unexpected happened in the mid-1970s. The personal computer began to appear, not as a consumer product yet, but as a hobbyist device. Engineers and technologists were building their own machines from kits, experimenting with what a computer in the home might mean. And some of them were connecting those home computers to telephone lines. And some of those telephone lines led to CompuServe's mainframes. In 1979, CompuServe launched a service called Micronet, later renamed CompuServe Information Service, aimed directly at this emerging population of home computer users. For a monthly fee and an hourly connection charge, anyone with a personal computer and a modem could dial in and access the company's network. What they found when they got there surprised everyone, including CompuServe. The company had built the service expecting people to use it for practical things: reference information, software downloads, news, financial data, and people did use it for those things. But what they used it for most, what drove connection hours and subscriber growth and word-of-mouth referrals more than any other feature, was talking to each other. CompuServe's forum system, organized communities where users could post messages, ask questions, and receive answers from other users, became the first large-scale online communities in history. There were forums for every interest imaginable: technology, medicine, law, science fiction, genealogy, aviation, cooking. Professionals shared expertise. Hobbyists found each other. People who had never met in person developed friendships, rivalries, and intellectual partnerships that would last decades. By the mid-1980s, CompuServe had hundreds of thousands of subscribers. By the late 1980s, it had crossed 1 million. By the early 1990s, it had over 3 million, making it, by a considerable margin, the largest online service in the world. It also had email. Real email, the ability to send a message to any other CompuServe subscriber, reliably, instantly, with a permanent record. CompuServe email addresses were the first email addresses that millions of Americans ever had. It had everything, and it had it first. The problem with CompuServe was not its technology. Its technology was, by the standards of the time, genuinely impressive. Its network infrastructure was reliable and scalable. Its forum software was sophisticated. Its customer base was loyal and engaged in ways that most companies could only dream of. The problem was that CompuServe had been built by engineers, was run by engineers, and thought about its product the way engineers think about products, as a technical system to be optimized rather than a community to be cultivated. The pricing structure told the whole story. CompuServe charged by the hour. In its early years, the hourly rate was as high as $12 during peak times, an enormous sum in 1980s money, and a constant source of anxiety for users who watched the clock while they typed. The company had inherited this pricing model from its time-sharing roots, where billing by the minute made perfect sense because computing time was genuinely scarce and expensive. But as the cost of computing collapsed through the 1980s and into the 1990s, CompuServe's pricing model became less a reflection of its costs and more a reflection of its inability to imagine a different relationship with its customers. While CompuServe charged by the hour, a scrappy competitor in Northern Virginia was thinking about the problem differently. America Online, AOL, had been founded in 1985 as a service for Commodore computer users, and had spent its early years as a minor player in a market that CompuServe dominated. But AOL had made a strategic decision that would eventually prove decisive. It would charge a flat monthly fee. The difference sounds simple. It was transformative. With a flat fee, users did not watch the clock. They did not calculate the cost of spending another 20 minutes in a chat room. They did not feel the anxiety of the meter running while they tried to compose a message. They just used the service, casually, habitually, the way people would eventually use the internet. AOL also understood something about its customers that CompuServe never fully grasped. Most of them were not engineers or technology enthusiasts. They were ordinary people, families, teenagers, retirees, who wanted something simple and approachable and fun. AOL's interface was colorful, friendly, and aggressively easy to use. CompuServe's interface was text-based, command-driven, and demanded a level of technical comfort that most ordinary people did not have and did not want to develop. And then AOL did something that was, in retrospect, one of the most effective marketing campaigns in the history of American business. It mailed floppy disks and later CDs to every address it could find, hundreds of millions of them, in cereal boxes, in magazine inserts, in hotel rooms, attached to the covers of computer magazines. The disks contained AOL's software and offered a free trial. You did not have to seek out AOL. AOL arrived at your door. CompuServe watched this campaign with the polite skepticism of a company that believed its product was self-evidently superior and that serious users would find their way to it without the need for such aggressive tactics. It was a catastrophic misreading of the market. By the mid-1990s, AOL was growing at a rate that CompuServe could not match. The flat-fee model, the friendly interface, and the carpet-bombing CD campaign had brought millions of new users online, users who had never heard of CompuServe and had no particular reason to seek it out. CompuServe responded, but too slowly and too partially. It introduced a flat-fee option in 1996. It redesigned its interface. It tried to compete on AOL's terms. But by 1996, AOL had over 7 million subscribers to CompuServe's 3 million, and the gap was widening every month. The company that had invented the online world was losing the race to inhabit it. In 1996, H&R Block, the tax preparation company that had owned CompuServe since 1980, decided it was time to exit the online services business. CompuServe was spun off as an independent public company in 1996. Its stock debuted at a reasonable valuation. Its subscriber base was still substantial. On paper, it remained a significant player, but the trajectory was unmistakable. Subscriber growth had stalled. The technical users who had been CompuServe's most loyal customers were discovering the public internet, which by the mid-1990s had developed a graphical interface through the World Wide Web and was rapidly becoming accessible to anyone with a modem and a browser. The proprietary online service model was being rendered obsolete by an open network that no single company owned. In 1997, WorldCom acquired CompuServe's network infrastructure for $1.2 billion. The subscriber base, the actual users, the community, the 3 million people whose online lives had been built on CompuServe's forums and email system, was sold separately to AOL. AOL paid $175 million for CompuServe subscribers. It then spent the next 2 years systematically migrating those subscribers onto AOL's own platform and allowing the CompuServe brand to fade into dormancy. By 2000, CompuServe Information Service had effectively ceased to exist as a meaningful product. The forums that had sustained online communities for 2 decades were shuttered. The email addresses that had been the first email addresses millions of Americans ever owned were discontinued. The company that had invented online community had been absorbed, stripped, and discarded. WorldCom collapsed in 2002 in what was at the time the largest corporate bankruptcy in American history. Nothing of CompuServe remained. There is a particular kind of failure that the story of CompuServe represents, one that is different from the failure of a company that simply made a bad product, or ran out of money, or was crushed by a competitor with superior technology. CompuServe's failure was a failure of self-knowledge. The engineers and executives who built CompuServe understood on a technical level exactly what they had created. What they did not understand, what they never fully grasped, was what their product meant to the people who used it. CompuServe's forums were not a feature. They were the thing. The people who spent hours in CompuServe's science fiction forum, or its medical information forum, or its aviation community, they were not using a technical service. They were living a part of their social and intellectual lives in a new kind of space that had never existed before. They had found communities of people who shared their interests, their questions, their expertise. They had built relationships. They had developed identities. CompuServe charged them by the hour for this. AOL gave it to them for a flat monthly fee and put a disk in their cereal box. The lesson is not that AOL was smarter or more innovative than CompuServe. AOL made its own catastrophic strategic errors. Its $164 billion merger with Time Warner in 2000 stands as one of the most destructive corporate combinations in history. The lesson is that being first is not the same as understanding what you have. Every generation of technology produces its CompuServe, the company that builds the essential thing before anyone else, captures an early market of sophisticated users, and then watches a scrappier, less technically rigorous competitor take the mass market by understanding that most people do not want the best product. They want the most accessible one. MySpace had it before Facebook. Friendster had it before MySpace. BlackBerry had the smartphone before Apple. Yahoo had search before Google. The pattern is so consistent that it has become something close to a law of technology markets. The company that invents the category rarely owns the category. CompuServe's engineers built email, chat, file sharing, online forums, and electronic commerce before most of the world knew any of those things were possible. They did it in Columbus, Ohio, with mainframe computers and telephone lines, for an audience of insurance companies and hobbyists. They built the architecture of the connected world. And then they charged $12 an hour for it. The internet that exists today, the social networks, the forums, the communities, the email that connects 2 billion people, is built on foundations that CompuServe laid. The behaviors it cultivated, the social norms it established, the technical problems it solved, all of it flowed forward into the world that came after. CompuServe did not disappear because it failed. It disappeared because it succeeded and never noticed.